now going to talk about some of the benefits of video games for children. Just a fair warning, this is what I wrote my master's thesis on, so there's a lot of material here. The prevalence of video games. According to the ESA, the Entertainment Software Association, 64% of U.S. households own a device that they use to play video games. 60% of Americans play games daily, most of them adults, and almost half of them female. 55% of the most frequent gamers say that video games help them connect with their friends. 46% say it helps their family spend time together. In 2017, consumers spent $36 billion on the video game industry, hardware, softwares, accessories, etc. The top reported reasons that parents play video games with their children are that it's fun for all of us, my child asks me to, it's a good opportunity to socialize with my child, I enjoy playing video games as much as my child, and it helps me monitor what they are playing. In other words, the video game industry is huge, and it's not going anywhere, no matter how much it's used as a scapegoat. So, can video games be used as learning tools? Why should they be used? What makes them so powerful? And that's what I'm going to talk about. So, they help with technology knowledge. Experience with computers gives children valuable skills in modern society. Video games can provide informal education for the world of technology and computers. The games that came with the original Windows operating system were actually included to help teach people computer skills that they would need to use Windows. Solitaire taught how to drag and drop with a mouse. Minesweeper taught mouse accuracy and left and right clicking. So from the beginning of Windows, they were using games to teach technology skills. Skills and processes developed in one application can be transferred to another. Children who are familiar with one computer program are given a jump start in learning other similar programs with similar interactions. Also, knowledge of a few applications gives children confidence in their ability to learn and use technology. So, video games can increase familiarity and comfort with technology. Skill enhancement. When video games are used in the classroom to supplement class material, they can improve the learning outcomes of the students. Games can put subject matter into context and make the student an active participant in the learning versus just a passive act of listening to lectures. So video games can be used to teach school subjects such as geography, biology, history, math, reading, everything. And technology can provide interactive learning environments and can enhance communication and collaboration. So educational material in a game context, children are more likely to learn and retain information no matter the subject. So if you can put educational material in the form of a game, children are more likely to learn it and remember it. Video games can enhance cognitive skills. Some of these include anticipatory thinking. This is guessing what's going to happen next. Means ends analysis. What should I do to get the outcome that I want? Working memory. We've talked about that and how important it is. Problem solving. And spatial abilities such as visual attention, mental rotation, etc. And many, many more. There have been a lot of studies that show that video games can enhance these skills. So here's a little graphic that just shows some of the benefits of video games. People who play fast-paced games have better visual attention and cognition. Certain video games encourage physical activity, some of which may be used for physical therapy too. The Nintendo Wii started this. It was video games that got people up off the couch, or if you remember Dance Dance Revolution, or other games that can encourage people to get up and move. Video games can promote social interactions and friendships as kids make friends in person and online. Students who play pro-social games are more likely to help others in real-life situations, and there are a lot of games out there meant to teach pro-social skills. Tetris players develop a thicker cortex than those who don't play. So people who play Tetris are showing a physical change in their brain. Video games can test your memory skills, your hand-eye coordination, and the ability to detect small activities on the screen. Depending on the type of game, video games can help working memory, critical thinking, and problem solving. So a lot of different studies have shown that video games can provide a lot of benefits. So why is that? Why are video games so effective? Well, if you remember flow theory, Okay, so flow is the state of being in the zone. It's your brain working at its optimal ability. Okay, and flow is when you're doing something you enjoy for intrinsic motivation. We had a whole list of criteria about flow. If you don't remember, or if you want to know more, look it up. Flow is amazing. People who have been in a state of flow show to learn information faster, retain it longer, they can apply more skills together. It's the brain working at its best. And video games are a great way to get someone into the flow state. Things that make a good video game are the same things that make someone enter flow. So has anyone ever been sucked into a game and played it for hours without noticing? Okay, then you are in a state of flow. Part of the characteristics of flow are intrinsic motivation. So it's an important part of learning. It's positively associated with GPA and standardized test scores. So children with more intrinsic motivation do better. Intrinsic motivation occurs when the activity is enjoyable in and of itself rather than an external imposition. And according to flow theory, enjoyment comes from a sense of novelty and accomplishment. Flow creates intrinsic motivation. Students find gaming computer applications more appealing, engaging, and effective than non-gaming computer applications that contain the same information. So the same information but put in terms of a game make it more appealing and increase intrinsic motivation. And teachers see that increase of intrinsic motivation as the greatest advantage of using games in the classroom. Essentially, kids want to play them. Games increase engagement in the learning process. Another important aspect of flow is the idea of control, that you have control over your own abilities. And video games allow the player to have that sense of control. Rather than having information fed to them, they are active rather than passive in their learning. Video games can allow students to be more autonomous in their learning, which teachers also see as an advantage of using video games in the classroom. And teachers have noticed that even students who usually have trouble behaving in class can work in peace and quiet while using video games without disturbing the other students, and that they actually appear interested in the educational content. So teachers have noticed the power of video games in the classroom. So educational video games. There's a whole class of video games out there called edutainment games. They're combining the words education and entertainment. With the numbers we listed previously, is it any wonder that companies are trying to capitalize on both the popularity of video games and the idea in our society that we need to be constantly stuffing our children's head with knowledge? Of course companies are trying to make money off of this. So some big educational video game companies are Leapfrog, ABC Mouse, Reader Rabbit. Okay, there's a lot of them out there, and I'm sure you've all seen them and probably played them. Most of these games actually lack the features to truly promote learning, as well as the features that make video games fun to play. So essentially, most edutainment games are combining the worst of entertainment and the worst of education and putting them together. They are glorified worksheets that emphasize the drill and grill mentality of school curricula. Once the novelty of the graphics and sounds wears off, the games are boring, repetitive, and mostly ineffective. Okay? So what does make a good educational game? The addition of even a simple gaming element, such as keeping score, can make students more interested and increase the information learned and retained. So what makes a good one? The list of factors that make a good educational game are very similar to the factors that are important for flow. It needs clear goals with feedback. Goals should be made clear and easy to keep track of. Should be a mixture of short and long-term goals, such as side quests. They should encourage cognitive tasks, such as planning and monitoring. If goals are too easy, the game is boring. If they're too hard, the player gets frustrated and quits. So goals should start easy and get progressively harder as the player gets good at the game. And the goals should also be meaningful. They should make sense within the content of the game. So monitoring goals is part of this. They need to be able to see their progress toward goals. They get a notification when a goal is achieved. And they should receive some sort of instructive feedback. This is more than just a right or wrong response. Instructive feedback means giving tips to improve performance. Feedback can not only increase performance and keep player interested, but encourages reflection, backtracking, anticipation, etc. So good feedback can increase engagement in the game and those cognitive skills that we need to work on. Progression of difficulty is important. We need to keep games at the optimal level of challenge. This goes along with the idea of the ZPD and flow theory. Many video games allow players to choose their own difficulty level. Teachers value games with progression so that students of different ability can play at different levels. They also must be able to save and load so that the player doesn't have to repeat material that is now too easy. When they play, they should be able to pick up from where they left off. And learning should be within the game. Learning needs to be embedded within the game instead of existing outside of the game. Learning outside of the gameplay means that the game is interrupted for the sake of learning content, such as when a question pauses a game until it's answered. When learning interrupts the game, it disrupts the flow of the player and encourages them to guess. So guessing should not be part of the gameplay. If a question has a multiple choice answers, players feel no real need to think about the answer. Instead, they just want to guess as quickly as possible and get back to the game. Games should have some element of fantasy, anything that puts the material into any context. For example, students using a program that has them answer math questions is not fantasy. However, when every right answer results in the destruction of an enemy or the advancement of a character, the program is using fantasy. If the fantasy is interesting, the content becomes more interesting. This allows vicarious experience, increases emotional investment, and that's highest when the player can actually identify with their character. So they should be able to choose a character that they can identify with, such as a boy or a girl, or customize their appearance. So we usually identify with the character the best when the character is the same age and gender of the player, and when the character's personality traits and goals resonate with the player. And fantasy can also improve memory of the content. And last, games need peer and teacher involvement. When students play a game together, they discuss strategies and work together for the same goal. Teachers see the opportunities for peer collaboration as one of the greatest benefits of using games in the classroom. We also need teacher or parent involvement. When used in classrooms, computer games should not be treated as standalone tools, just like educational TV is not as powerful on its own. When an adult is present, children are more attentive, more interested, and they experience less frustration. So teachers should play the role of facilitator, scaffolding their students through computer activities. Children who have teacher scaffolding plan more, work collaboratively, explain strategies, and complete tasks more efficiently. Studies also show that young children who use computers, who had teacher mediation, had stronger gains in those cognitive abilities such as vocabulary, abstract thinking, planning, kindergarten readiness skills, and visual motor coordination than children who didn't have the teacher mediation. So just like with educational TV, the games need help from an adult. They need an adult to talk about the games with the children and scaffold them through them. Okay, we will finish this in the next video.